What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hartness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I am on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Dov Tsal, and we talk about Taoism and how it relates to facilitation. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, why don't you visit workshops.work and download my free one-page summary. And now, enjoy the show. Dov, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for welcoming me.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation, especially because we had an exploration call, which lasted an hour and which we could have already fully recorded. So let's explore what comes up today. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
Well, I have a problem with words. So I guess considering myself as a facilitator years ago, I think when I started doing Scrum, when I became a Scrum Master, and I realized that my role is just to help the flow. No, not to intervene too much. But again, it's a process, you start by having a deep understanding, and then it becomes clearer and clearer, and your understanding takes the path of its own. So I guess 10 years ago.
Wonderful. And what I find intriguing is that you started calling yourself a facilitator when you started Scrum. And I have often the impression that especially Scrum Masters would not call themselves a facilitator.
It's a matter of self-perception, right? So a Scrum Master is someone who is, one, to keep the guardrails of Scrum, but two, which is much more important, and a lot of times it's forgotten, is to help agility grow inside whatever they cultivate. And often when the choice is there, do I keep the rigid rules of Scrum and let go agility, or the other way around? Then it's a personal choice. And then you can see who sees their role as facilitating and who sees their role as putting in place a framework.
I like this distinction. So to see whether it is the framework that is actually giving all the structure and how much space it actually leaves to the facilitator to guide and support the group in its process to find the best solution.
And there's a lot of that. I know that since I started doing Scrum, the Scrum guide changed quite a few times. I don't even know how much. And every time it becomes thinner. Every time whatever things were there explicitly become implicit. Whatever is there as rules become suggestions. So I think that Scrum itself, I think Scrum as a framework that is evolving to better support agility, realizes that it should be more modest.
And more agile.
Yes.
Very adjusting. But this would then also mean that the role of the Scrum Master became more sophisticated because it actually leaves more space for the Scrum Master, her himself.
Yeah. It depends who defines the role, right? Because at the end, a lot of people, Scrum Masters, facilitators, whatever, they live in the context of whatever is required from them by the space that they work at. Right? And I know a lot of Scrum Masters who struggle because they want to be facilitators, but the managerial hat is something that's imposed on them by the organization.
Interesting. And I now feel that we could have an entire conversation on just that.
Why not?
Why not? Why not is because I have another agenda and I have a deeper curiosity. And maybe we come back to Scrum and the role of the managerial hat. I am very curious in a podcast that you host yourself, Agile Tao. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Scrum. And before I ask you everything about Agile Tao, I would like to first explore what are the other schools of thought that have inspired you or formed you as a facilitator, because you also do Lego, so there's serious play involved.
Yeah, so I don't what you call a serious play or a liberating structure or stuff like that is not a school of thought, it's a school of doing. And for me, as you hinted, the most powerful school of thought is this thing called Taoism that I guess we'll touch on today, which basically is a way to see the world as one. Is a way to see that your role in the world is just like a role of a neuron in your brain,
which is connected to the others.
Yes, and as a neuron that's self-aware, you would like to contribute to the whole brain to function better. And I guess we can talk for hours. What does better mean? But Taoism, it's philosophy, mindset that was formulated around 2,500 years ago in China. And basically, the way I perceive it, the bottom line is the only thing that exists is everything, and the only time that exists is now. And all the rest, all these divisions are illusions, are things that our brain, mind, whatever you want to call it, puts in place because we're a machine of sense making, because we're not able to face a huge object without cutting it into functional parts.
And you compared the role of an individual in Taoism to the role of a neuron. And neurons interact with each other through synapses, yes, which are basically brain chemicals. So what would then be the equivalent to the synapses?
Communication, what we're doing now, right? So if now we're two neurons, we interact with each other, and our pulses go to the listeners, I guess, right?
Yes.
And not only this, whatever we are saying is there because of the other interactions that we had that brought us here, right?
Yeah.
And it's not even, I'll go more philosophically. There is a lamp behind you, and this lamp is part of our exchange. If the lamp wasn't there, maybe our word choices would have been different, which would lead us to somewhere else.
And it's the same for where I'm sitting, where you're sitting, how comfortable we feel in our bodies, because this affects our perception, focus.
Yes.
That's why I don't record. I do record the video, but I would not publish it, because I think it takes away the ease we speak. Because when we think, sometimes we don't look pretty. And if we try to look pretty and be smart at the same time, it changes the interaction, the communication, and thereby the outcome.
Yeah. I heard that one of the new features that Zoom has is to remove your image.
Yes.
And there's a lot of others that already thought of that you want to be less self-aware of how you look.
Sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes you don't. When was the moment that you connected Taoism with your work? What came first, Taoism or your work?
Taoism came thousands of years ago, right? So
to you.
Yes. So for me, it was two worlds that are unconnected for years. And then suddenly, I thought about the story of Lao Tzu, the fictional author of the Book of Tao, and I realized that this is the story of the first agile coach that I know. Right? It's someone who was there to help the manager of a very large enterprise called the Empire of China to see how this empire, who stands in front of big changes, what can it do? And basically, like, I'll tell you the story really, really short. The Emperor of China had 3 consultants, and there was a big mess. because since the invention of iron, they started looting, and the canton started fighting with each other, a lot of robbers on the roads. And he had three consultants. One was the top-down, the use the force guy, who was the head of the army, and he said, you should use the army to quiet everything down, reconquer your empire by force. He had a wonderful organizational consultant called Confucius, which perhaps you've heard of, who said, invent a new religion. And in this new religion, you will be the one on top. Below you will be the head of each canton, below them the head of each family, below them the firstborn, below them the secondborn, etc. Everyone will have something to lose if the order is disrupted. And he had this strange guy called Lao Tzu, who was the head of his library and would disappear for days barefoot and talk to animals and God knows what stuff. And he asked them what to do. And basically, the way I understand it, Lao Tzu told him, shit happens. The less that you will intervene, the better. Let things go the way they want to go. And he couldn't take that advice. And Lao Tzu asked him to leave. He left to the Himalaya on his one-way journey with his favorite ox. And the emperor, when he realized what an error he made by letting this guy go without any documentation of his huge experience in life, asked everyone on the roads that lead to the Himalaya, if there's a strange man with an ox coming and he's barefoot, stop him and don't let him go before he documents everything that he knows. And that's the book of Tao, basically. So Lao Tzu was the first agile coach. And when I realized it was, it's like two worlds coming together. Like two of my favorite musicians, Lou Reed and Laurie Anderson, at some point they got married. And it was such a revelation that these two amazing worlds that, huge sources of richness that I had in my life suddenly found each other. I had the same feeling when I realized that, in fact, the first and the most inspiring agile coach was this guy whose advice was not taken and whose impact is huge today because his book is, I think, the book that has most versions of translation in the world. So that's a story.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And if you would compare the Lao Tzu way of agile to today's way of agile or interpretation of agile, what has changed, or what is maybe everyone getting wrong, or many people getting wrong about what agile actually is at its core?
So I think just like the Emperor of China couldn't allow himself to take the advice of Lao Tzu, a lot of organizations today don't feel that they can afford to take the agile idea, even if someone there understands it, because the stakes of letting go are sometimes too high.
So what needs to change, or what is so scary about agile? The letting go.
So scary for whom, right? It's agile is a way to redistribute. And I guess we'll go into facilitation at some point. It's the same thing. And obviously, the people who thrive on power have the most to lose. Mm-hmm. And when I think of the story of Lao Tzu, and I try to be in the head of the Emperor of China, I would say, even if for me I don't care, I don't think that the structure that is around me will accept this. Right? I have army and I have ministers and I have a political system in place. And now saying, just let things happen, it's okay, is something that I might find myself out of the system, and the system will keep on with the patterns that it acquired without me.
And you mentioned the army now twice. And this makes me think that there are certain organizations that maybe cannot afford to go agile. Or how would an agile army look like?
Afford? An agile army would look like a militia, I guess. Yeah. I think, again, it depends what image of an army do you see when you say army, right? So there are armies that are guided by I'd say, a dictator armies, right? Armies that when the head is dead, then the army will be happy. And there are armies that know how to act independently. That when you have a group of soldiers, they don't really need a formal leader now. They need a mission, and they can just go and do stuff.
So can be very highly agile, actually.
Yes, exactly. But what I'm saying is that the higher you are in the hierarchy, if your goal is to acquire power and not the good of the whole of the organization, then you have a lot to lose. So why would you support that?
Absolutely. And if you're not looking for the best for the group, but only for your own power, then the chances are also very high that the bottom just runs into different directions and are not aligned unless you use your power.
Like I developed a model of how to quote unquote agilify something. And like we can talk about what something means. At first, you have a group of forces, let's call it team members, okay, that don't have the motivation. They don't move a lot. So the first thing to do is to put energy in the system. And this energy is on the individual level. So people can start caring about different things. They can fight with each other. No, they can make allies. They don't have a goal, a shared goal, but they start having some energy. And the second thing is now to give them a sense of purpose, whatever it is. So now that they are moving, try to make the movement align.
Sounds like physics.
Yes. And now when they're aligned, if you take a look back, now they're one entity that moves somewhere, and alongside there's a lot of others that also move somewhere that are not aligned, because you've done the same with them and now do the same again, right? So now that you have a lot of teams moving in different directions, now help them align. So usually transformations are done top down. And I would say that the way that I understand how you can make an organization, I'll use a four-letter word, harmonious, is to start from the bottom and start to have these islands of intention.
There's a lot to unpack there. My first thought is that you sound like an optimist. And I'm happy about that, because what I hear is you need energy independent of whether it's positive energy or negative energy, whether it's conflict or love, to make things moving. And you need that in order to achieve a transformation and to align them in one direction. Whereas I often hear that if there's too much negative energy and animosity in an organization, a transformation is almost prone to fail. And the second thing I'd like to unpack, and I just throw it at you, trusting that you'll make sense out of all of that.
Or not.
Or not. And then we explore together. That's what we're here for. The second is, you mentioned harmony. And I think harmony is a word that would not intuitively come to mind to a leader of an organization or a head. So what is it about harmony that you're looking for in an organization?
So I'm not sure. Depends what sort of a leader. But again, you said I'm naive, and I liked it. I accept it.
Optimist. Interesting that you hear naive when I say optimist.
So often I think of myself as naive by choice.
Love that.
Because I choose to see things in the positive way. Like, this is naivety for me, right?
Like Candide.
Yes. So again, depends what sort of a leader. But for me, harmony is the state where the whole entity drives toward the same goal without any friction inside it, right? So all the teams go in like a pod of dolphins, if you want. I don't know if you ever saw a pod of dolphins. They never bump into each other.
Yeah.
And not only this, they make way in the water, so they swim much faster than one would swim alone. Okay. And when you see a pod of dolphins or a murmuration, for example, of birds, it seems like this big thing has an intention of its own. And everyone inside is not conforming to it, but is part of it. No, willingly dances the dance of the bigger whole.
And the distinction between conformity and willingly following is that conformity is a power that tries to adjust, whereas willingness is an inner drive, an intrinsic motivation. Oh,
yeah, I think conformity means, okay, I'll do what you're saying because you pay my salary. I won't resist. It's okay.
Yes.
You don't have to be afraid that I will rebel. This is conformity, right?
Okay. And then it's interesting that when I hear harmony, I somehow relate it to rest. But what you're explaining is movement, is energy, is moving forward in harmony.
So I don't understand, how does harmony relate to rest?
I don't know. It's maybe just
harmonious music is music that moves, right?
Yeah, very true. It's funny how sometimes we relate words to certain emotions or states. Yeah. So if all agile has its origin in Tao, in Taoism, what is then the distinction between agile Tao and normal agile, if there is any?
So I'm not saying it's the origin. What I'm saying is that the book that defines best what agility is, for me, is the book of Tao.
Thank you.
It's really hard to the world is so complex or chaotic that it's never easy to say what is the origin of what. But I'm sure that these ideas of Taoism had a big seed in the format of the Agile Manifesto, if you want. It had a big seed in human thought today in the world, for sure. So in our podcast, by the way, like what we're doing, the Book of Tao is comprised of very small poems. I can read you one if you want. And what we're trying to do in the podcast is to read one poem and then to think aloud. Imagine that an HR person or the CTO or a developer or an engineer or someone just got hit in the head by this. Imagine that he just got it, right? Got this small poem. What would change in the way they work today? Okay, nice. So like that's the journey that we're trying to take in the podcast.
And would you run this exercise also with a client, with an HR person, with a CEO, to throw the poem at them and see?
Yeah, so not the poem, but I'm running one workshop that I run a lot with my teams or with people when the time is right. I teach people how to always be right. And this is inspired by Taoism. And I can run it by you in 2 minutes. It's really,
yes, and then I would really love to hear a poem.
Yeah.
So
great.
Always being right. I think there's no single person in the audience who doesn't want to know.
Okay. So first of all, to always be right, you have to say something, right? So you can avoid being wrong already by never saying anything, by just asking questions. This is already nice. When you say something, to be right, you have to be sure that you're the expert number one of what you're talking about, at least in the room and preferably in the world, right? If you say now something about astrophysics, I will probably be able to go to the web and in 5 minutes tell you that you're wrong. So you have to speak only about things that are your number one specialty in the world, okay? Is there anything like that? Is there anything where you're the number one expert of?
I would then think that I have to ask a lot of questions and otherwise keep quiet.
Yeah. So I claim that you are the number one expert in the world on one topic, which is you.
Makes sense. Yes.
So if now you say, I don't understand, I can't say that you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
if now you say, I don't have the patience for this, I can't say you're wrong.
So basically we speak about us or we ask questions.
Yes.
These are the two alternatives. Or we shut up.
So does it help? Will it help you always be right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what teams get, or like what people get, is that if you start any question but by I think that, in my opinion, this, I see that, you'll always be right. I can't argue with you. So instead of you saying this is wrong and I say this is right, you will say I think this is wrong and I say I think this is right. And now I can give my glasses to you and show you what I see, and you give your glasses to me, and it stops being a confrontation about reality. So once you let go the idea that you own reality, the world becomes more harmonious. Now we can share our views as complementary views and not as confrontational views.
And it opens the door to curiosity, to investigation. As you said, you're basically handing over someone your glasses to see through. And still I wonder why this gift, how I see it now, as you explain it, is so often refused. So despite someone saying, I believe that and I think this, there's still moments where then there is but I believe this and I think that. And then you have two opposing views instead of a curious inquiry to really understand the other. So what would be the magic trick that you would teach?
I don't know about magic. The more you understand, like when you get, I think that whenever you get into the habit of saying, I think that, with this comes the notion that your view is just your view.
And then it's basically leading by example, that if I start every sentence with, I think, I believe, I sense, I feel, then if someone opposes that and says basically the opposite, but I think that, then it would be my role to be curious and investigate.
Yeah. So when someone says, but I think that, I would say, why but? Right. So but is another word that there's a lot of words that make our reality. But is a big one.
And
but
should
says,
is the other.
Yeah. But and should. Yeah. We're starting to make a collection. Banned word, right? Words.
Deserve. Deserve is a very bad word as well.
Yes. By whom? Who gives you the yes? So and just to finish off, like the bonus part of this workshop is that now that you got to practice this, now you can nudge the others as well. Like if you tell me this is wrong, I say, yeah, I understand. In your opinion, this is wrong. And in my opinion, this is right. So I can start injecting this language into your vocabulary as well. So I'm not saying you're saying it wrong, but it's wrong only in your view. I say, yeah, I understand that you say that in your view, it's wrong.
And then you're always right. And you promised me a poem.
Yes, I didn't promise, but you asked nice enough. So I'll get you one. So I tried to find something that has to do with facilitation somewhere. We'll see if it works or not. And it's called Self. And I just want to say something about the book. The book I'm talking about is not the book of Tao. It's a version called the Agile Tao that was written by Peter Merrill, who was a big friend of mine, which is an attempt to refactor the book of Tao, not into a new language, but into a new mindset, which is agility. So unlike a lot of translations that are very woo-woo, new agey, this one is addressed to talk about leadership and organization and stuff like that. So we'll see if this one contains a sample of this.
And I will put the link in the show notes.
Awesome.
Together with your podcast, of course.
So this one is number 8 in the book, and it's called Self. Becoming and decaying generates hope and fear, and thereby self. Without self, to whom could they occur? Self may acquire the world, But agility accepts the world, joining your form to others, seeing their needs as yours until your life bears fruit and your thoughts take form in their lives.
Thank you.
This is a sample.
And I can see how it works, and there's so many layers in there to work through. I think you can have an entire workshop on that.
Yeah, or an entire podcast, right?
Or an entire podcast. How long are your podcasts?
Usually they last about 40 minutes per poem.
Okay. I would have been surprised if it was any shorter. And yeah, there's so much to unpack. How do you relate it to facilitation? Why did you choose this one?
So as a facilitator, you don't really have a will of your own, and you try to let things go where they want to go, right? You don't force them. You don't have a self if you want, right? You try to help the self of whatever happens take form.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you try to ride it, the more you bring yourself into the workshop, the more it becomes about you. The more you take power, the less whatever happens around becomes weaker. And like it has a line here, joining your form to others, right? And when I facilitate, it's mainly about emergence. It's mainly about seeing what happens and give space to that.
And I agree that this giving space, creating space, cannot happen freely if you do have a self, if you have a stake, if you have an opinion, a judgment. Although I think this is a state of perfection that is very difficult to achieve because it would mean perfect neutrality of the facilitator.
Yeah. So I don't know a lot about neutrality, but like when the first line talks about hope and fear, I find that a lot of people, the more they prepare, the more they try to control the event, workshop, whatever they facilitate, right? The more you have a strong vision of what is the process that is going to take place, where do I want this workshop to end, the more you fear that it might not go there.
Yeah, expectation. And also the more you prepare, the more you want to apply what you prepared. Because otherwise it feels as if you might have lost your time or did work that was worthless.
So frankly, for me, no. I know that there were a lot of times that I prepared a lot, and it allowed me to do something totally different when I came there.
And for me, this is the beauty of it, to prepare, highly prepare to then let go.
Yes.
So we have to prepare without holding too tight to it. Because if we don't prepare, then all this energy in the room that you explained before will go in all the different directions.
And I'm not sure. So what do you call prepare?
What I call prepare is understanding the purpose deeply, understanding the different forces in the room or the different expectations, so that I know what are the conversations that need to happen in order to achieve that purpose.
For me, this is the first thing that I do when I enter the room. It's not preparing in advance. So in advance, I can talk to a lot of people and understand what they would like to take place at the moment that I talk to them. And then I enter the room and it can be totally different. And now what do? Do I carry the plan, or do I let things go, or do I do something in between? And a lot of times, the people who you prepared with, even if they're not there, they're present in the room, right? So when you say what needs to take place now in this space and time with the people that are present, there's also the ghost of the people who asked for whatever you want to facilitate. And you have to balance all of this. And they're present there, even if not physically. Now the word physically, that takes a whole different dimension, right? But even if they're not there in person, they are part of the stakeholders of whatever will take form now. And sometimes your role is to bring them, embody them into the space that you have with these people that you have now, and see what happens.
And I try to wrap my head around the fact that you don't prepare, you go into the room to sense what the group needs and what there is, to them guide them. So, and this relates back to the poem that you read, where you have to fully merge with the group so that you give yourself to the group.
I don't see it as I give myself to the group. The goal is that the whole group, including me and including whatever space there is, becomes one. So it's not a sacrifice. It's not a Jesus story.
Yes. I think we're aligned on that. But then you have to guide. And so you will be the guide then for the group, which is a huge responsibility. And it requires then the sponsor of the workshop or meeting or whatever it is to fully trust the process, and that you know that you might know better than them or even the group what the group needs.
Usually I know nothing. So I don't know about knowing better. But I believe that through emergence, the group will achieve much more than through a plan that was conceived before this thing took place. And the plan is there like scaffold, like the plan is there. A lot of times, I speak on a very high level, but sometimes the workshop means we have to find this and this and this. This is the process. And it goes exactly like that. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
But not because that was the plan, because this is another metaphor from the Book of Tao, is how a valley leads a river. Okay, so the river goes where it wants to go, and the valley is there to lead the way, but it doesn't tell the water, don't go another way.
These are the healthy boundaries.
Yes, and if the water breaks the boundaries, that's what happens.
So how would you then start a workshop? So you arrive, you have not prepared, but you're fully present to let things emerge that need to emerge.
Yeah.
How do you start? Where do you get the hook?
So I start by a question. So let's say you can start by saying hello or something, but the main question is, why are you here? Take 1 minute of silence and think to yourself, why are you here? What is the best thing that you can get out of this hour? And share it somehow with the group. And then let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Powerful. Can you share an anecdote of what could happen or what happened?
A very simple one is that I asked this question a while ago. What would you like to happen? And they said, we don't want any agile games, which is great, right? So we didn't do any agile games. So I asked them, yes, but what would you like to happen? And we had a retrospective without any of these agile games, what they call.
Another label.
Why not?
Yeah.
Because I'm there to serve them. If I ask and I don't honor it, why would I ask? Right? Or in another place, I asked for a word cloud about the state of the team, anonymous, and someone wrote a rude word. I said, awesome. I don't know who wrote it, but it's really interesting. And we had, as a group, a discussion about this.
And how do you then know that the group arrived? Because I guess that if you let things emerge, then sometimes emergence goes fast and sometimes it takes time. So
I don't understand.
So is then the workshop concluded for you when the time is up, or when harmony emerges? Or is harmony actually a goal then of itself for a workshop?
It's a hard question. Is harmony a goal? I think harmony is more of a state than a goal. One of the rules of open space that I adore is it's over when it's over.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So our session takes half an hour and it's over when it's over. which means we have a hard boundary and we have a very flexible definition around it. If we're done in 5 minutes, we can stop after 5 minutes. If we're not done after half an hour, we can continue, only let's take it to the cafeteria or somewhere else, because this space is reserved for half an hour. And as always, the team has more say in it than they're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The decision whether something is over or not is not my decision. My decision is I have to go, right? But the conversation is not about me.
Beautiful.
Greetings, listeners. This June, Dancing with Markers is launching a new online self-paced course on visuals designed with facilitators in mind. Stop making boring, meaningless slide decks and start bringing visuals into your meetings in a fun, purposeful, and creative way that will have a real impact on improving the outcomes of your meeting. Visuals are central to facilitating engaging meetings, but so many facilitators and trainers lack a strong design muscle to create fun and purposeful flip charts, slides, and visual templates. For the facilitator who wants to incorporate better visuals into your meetings, this course is designed to transform you into a confident visual facilitator. Find the link to purchase in the show notes with a special 10% off coupon just for Workshops Work listeners. Now, back to the show.
So you mentioned in the exploration call, and I would like to come back to that you once facilitated, in air quotes, a workshop without being there. So what is the real role or responsibility of a facilitator when actually the group can conclude it and bring it to an end, although you might have to leave?
So, in fact, there were two phases to this. One was I attended a workshop that friends of mine did, which is done in total silence.
Mm-hmm.
So the facilitation part is a lot of posters on the walls, or now we try this again with the same friends in Miro. And as a facilitator, you take people through these posters, right? So like you flip you unhide something, the next step, you turn on the timer. And so I was in an event where they did this, and a lot of people heard about it, and they said, we would love to see it again. And they said, we can't because we have to go. We have tickets. We have to go this evening. And I said, tomorrow I can do it, only I have another thing at the same time. I can do it for you, so that it will be a facilitator-less meeting. And then we prepared the whole posters, only instead of someone turning it, you had a post-it covering it that says, turn this when you're ready, right? Like one thing that they did beautifully is every time, like they asked people to draw each other. And when the people showed the drawings, they said, like, with the facial expression, they say, it won't pass in the podcast. I guess they say, wow, like it's huge gestures. So we prepared post-its of huge gestures on the screen. Right, so on the posters. So we said, put your drawings here, and now look at them. Now turn this, and when they turn this, it says really in big letters, "Wow." Okay, so, and it was the two guys. They delayed the stage just because they wanted to see how a facilitatorless session would look, and they said that it was much more interesting than the one that they did. Now, it's not for every group for sure, but I had already two groups where the first time we facilitated something, the first time we had a retrospective, we did a silent retrospective, and both times it was totally awesome.
I can very well imagine that. Because through silence, you have, especially when you talk about retrospective, it's about reflection, it's about calming down and taking the time. Funny enough, it's exactly the opposite of your usual way of facilitating, where you say, okay, you go into the room and see what emerges. Here, you really have to structure everything. And I guess there's a place for both. So if it's really about a retrospective, which is a very clear process a group has to go through, you could facilitate it without being present. And in the opposite, you have to be fully present, not only physically, but mostly mentally.
Yeah. So for me, the one without a facilitator, as you said, is more of a game, more of an exercise. The ones that I did facilitate silently, they were emergent. Meaning I didn't prepare anything in advance. I just wrote my questions on a huge whiteboard. And then I told them, now write down your ideas. Told them, like I wrote the instruction. And then I said, now see all the ideas and write questions about your ideas. And at some point, when you feel the time is right, now which one of these would you like to explore deeper? And so this is something that you have to smell. But the second time that I did it with the same group, I didn't do it. So I coached someone who now took the role of a Scrum Master to this team to do it by himself. And it was awesome as well. And what I would do, I would pass my notes to him when I thought that something can be done differently. Sometimes they would accept it, sometimes they won't.
Nice. What makes a workshop fail?
What is failure? What do you mean by failure?
I leave it to you.
Yeah. So I have a quote from the Tao. It says, a big state should be governed, more or less, a big state should be governed like frying a small fish. So you should attend to it delicately. You should make sure that it's well cooked on all sides and it's not burnt anywhere.
And you need enough oil.
Okay, that's the metaphor. So perhaps that's one answer. I think too much control, too little control, too restricting boundaries, not enough restricting boundaries. That's the metaphor that I'm thinking of. And this is why I think as a facilitator, the most important thing is to be present when the fish is cooked and to not to watch YouTube videos while it's on the stove.
Yeah, because overcooking and undercooking are equally dangerous. Or risky.
Yeah, I don't know. What's the danger of a failed workshop? I don't know. No.
Oh, I know. I know.
Yeah. Again, it depends what sort of a workshop, but I think unclear goals for sure comes on the top of the list. False freedom. Like when our goal is to decide something that at the end someone will overrule.
Yes, exactly. And this was the example I thought about, and I caught myself. I said, I know. Oh, I think that I know. I have experienced something like that makes me believe that I know. I caught myself. I think it's exactly that, the false hope. If participants contribute their time, energy, creativity to something that is then not taken into a different direction, maybe compromised or hijacked, I think this can create a lot of harm.
Yeah, and I think it's mainly history, right? So how do you know that whatever you will decide will not be taken into account? Because you have your history with the organization. We already did a retrospective or post-mortem, and we already produced this, and nothing happened. And this is like, I think, another thing. When does your facilitation, when does a workshop end? When does it begin? Right. So one thing you can say, it's 9 to 10. This is 1 hour. I'm reading a book now about how rituals are made. And one thing that she said, which is wonderful, is an event starts at the minute that you know about it.
Yes.
And you have a lot of power to influence, one, how much preparation do people make before they enter an event? To what will be their mindset. By doing a lot of things, small things, requests to read something, the invitations in colorful font, I don't know what, pre-event, something before the event, and also after the event, like a week after the event, do you ask them, so what happened? What is remaining? There is one thing we didn't talk about is the meeting spicer cards, which is a set of coaching cards that I created to facilitate, to hack meeting culture. There is one card that I really like, which is a way to end the meeting. Mm-hmm. And the card says, take 20 seconds and think, will you remember this meeting tomorrow, in a week, in a month? And what will you remember? Mm. And I think it's an interesting question, right? It's if the event stopped and everyone erased it from their mind, and whatever is left are some pieces of paper or electronic stuff that they produced, then what is left?
And the beauty of the question is that once you ask it, they will remember. So it's a nudge, basically.
Of course.
I remember I had a physics teacher in high school, and he explained that a feu d'artifice, how do you call that? Fireworks are always perfectly symmetrical. And then he said, and from now on, every time you look at fireworks, you will remember your physics teacher. What occurs?
And it happens.
And it happened every time I look at the fireworks. So if you ask the group, what will you remember in half an hour, next day, next year, they might. And if it becomes a ritual, it will improve the meeting because they know that they will remember the meeting and they better keep it in good memory.
Yes, it's like there's a lot of nudging there. Like we can talk about this tool as well. What we did is we created a lot of 20-second exercises to enter and exit a meeting. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that, it's very powerful to create a meeting that is has the perfect format, but it's unreasonable to do if your daily, if your agenda is filled with meetings, mm-hmm. right? And what happens most of the time is that meetings serve very little purpose. So what we did, we created an activity, a game called the Meeting Spicer, where you choose at random some card in the beginning of the meeting. And it can be something simple as state the time. Did we start the time we planned? If no, what's the difference? And is it important? Ask the team, is it important? Because I don't know if it's important or not. And it can be something more vague, like to end the meeting by asking, think 20 seconds, what's my energy level now? Is it higher or lower than when I entered the meeting, and how come?
Mm. Would you debrief that, or is it just an individual reflection that then closes the meeting basically almost in silence?
Yeah, so for sure, I won't debrief it for two reasons. One, silence is a great way to end the meeting. Like, I think giving people a space of 20 seconds of silence is a gift. When they enter the meeting, when they exit the meeting, whenever you can say, now the rules say, I didn't tell you what to do, but the rules by the card that you randomly chose say that now you have to have 20 seconds of silence is already a gift. And when you say in these 20 seconds of silence, ask yourself, for example, when you enter, am I mandatory here? Think for yourself. Am I mandatory? Am I optional? What's my role here? It unites the team around this question because even though you said nothing, I know that you thought about this question as well as I know. So I know what I thought. But then when I look around, I ask myself, it's interesting. What did she think? And it creates some new space. Like it's like turning a page, if you want. Now, the question that is in my mind has to do with the presence of this space now and not what happened 5 minutes ago when I got out of another meeting.
Yeah, it gives permission to mentally arrive. And I think the randomness of the card, I don't know what the psychological effect is, but it seems to me more powerful to draw a random card and then everyone has to follow the rules, as you said, because that's what the card said, instead of having a facilitator inviting the group for 20 seconds
So I can tell you that there is one card which is, this meeting has no laptops. So close all your, it's before the COVID time, right? This meeting has no laptops.
It's a short meeting these days.
Close all your laptops except for one for presentation. And I created it because in my team, there was someone who always pissed me off that while everyone was working, he was always with his laptop. Okay. So I created this card, and now we start the meeting, and I say to someone, choose a random card, and they didn't choose that card. Before the card was in the deck, it would piss me off. But now I said, next time we'll get him. and it allowed me to be more present.
I love it. So you nudged yourself.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a tool, more or less.
Yeah. And maybe it relates to it, but before that, you mentioned something that we enter a workshop, or the participants, contributors, whoever you want to call them, enter a workshop, and there's already a history. And that's why, so the retrospective won't have an impact because the past hasn't had an impact.
It will have an impact. I'm not sure it will have the impact that you want it to have.
Exactly. I meant in the mindset of the participants that they may enter the space already with prejudices. And I also remember that you said that according to Tao, everything that happens in the moment, and you want to get rid of the past and of the future in order to be fully present.
No, you don't want to get rid of it. You accept it as a story, right? Part of what we have now is the story that we tell ourselves about what happened.
Yeah, because that's all we got. It's our narrative. It's our perception.
And also there is some story of the future, right? We are like there was Kurt Vonnegut, I think, he said, we're story creating machines. Mm-hmm. That's what we are. Like we're sense making story creating machines. Like our product is to take stuff around and make some moral out of it. There was a psychological experiment of a circle, a big circle, and there's a small circle that turns around, and a triangle that hops right behind the circle. And you ask people, what do you see? And they say the triangle is chasing the small circle around the big one. Right? It's not. It's the story that you tell yourself when you see these things on the screen.
Yeah. Yes, and each of our own stories is individual because it's shaped by our experience in the past, and which we then project into the future. I recently read this fantastic book, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain, written by a professor of physics. Fascinating, where she just disentangles all the metaphors that we're telling about the brain and how it functions. And that we often forget that our brain was not designed for decision-making or reasoning. Our brain is designed to keep us alive. Yes. Full stop.
Yeah. And so it's funny, I read now the latest David Eagleman book, which is exactly about this as well. Like it's mainly about the plasticity of the brain, how the brain readapts to whatever new situation arrives, right? So add another arm on your forehead, the brain will find how to move it.
Yes. And you can cut out 3/4 of your brain without any impact.
Because I won't say any impact.
Very little impacts, because the neurons just find their way to reconnect to each other. But we're deviating. Very interesting.
It's your show. It's your show.
I could totally geek out on that. But I was actually interested to know from you, how do you create the space for participants to be fully present, accepting the past as their own past and accepting the future as their own narrative of the future, so that they can really focus on whatever emerges?
How do I do that? How does one do that, I guess, right? That's the question.
Or maybe you can answer for.
So perhaps yesterday I talked to someone who is German. Mm-hmm. And she said, I have a hard time celebrating with my team because we're German and we don't like to talk about good stuff. What do I do? That's what I understood that she said. Right? And my advice to her was, so don't dedicate 10 minutes to bitch around bad things. Call it the bitching around bad things 10-minute session, right? And see what happens there. What I'm saying is give space to what wants to happen, and probably it will make space for something else. All the things that are unsaid, give them space to be said. It will clean the table for other stuff.
Yeah. And sometimes this can be achieved through silence.
Yes, it can be achieved in a lot of ways. But really, there is, again, one thing that I got from the Tao, I guess, is that there is one rule in life that I realized, which is whatever we resist stays and whatever we accept changes. Okay, so I'll give you a very physical example. When you have a pain is an interpretation of a sensation. And usually what we do, we block the pain. So we know that our foot hurts and we twist it so it doesn't hurt, and we don't listen to our pain. And it stays a lot. Okay, and for me, this is the explanation why most people suffer a lot and are happy not that much. Because when you're happy, you accept it, so it changes. And when you're sad, you try to resist it and fight it, so it stays.
Interesting. It reminds me of the philosophy of the Vipassana meditation, where you observe and accept the pain and it will pass anyway.
Yeah.
And the moment
you listen to it as a sensation, and when it's a sensation, it constantly changes.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you also realize that it's just your interpretation of the sensation that causes you, or that you call pain.
Yeah. So in this sense, and like one thing that there's a bigger topic there, perhaps I'll go there. The team as a team has a resistance to something. If you allow the team not to resist, they will get there and then they will get somewhere else. But as long as they resist, they're stuck in that resistance. Imagine that the team goes into a facilitation session, whatever you want to call it, a workshop, a meeting, and they know that their decisions will not make any difference. It will be a very low energy, nothing producing meeting. Now, if in the beginning you ask, can you anonymously vote, do you think that this session has a chance to have impact or not? And the anonymous response of the team is a resounding no. Now you have something to work with in the workshop, and you may produce value, right? Because now the question is, why do you think as a team, anonymously, that it will not make any impact? What should be changed for it to produce impact?
Or go in the extreme other direction, assuming that it won't have impact. So how can we create impact for you, the group, or create something that is irrelevant maybe for the organization, because it will remain without impact for the organization, but has the opportunity to create huge impact for the group?
Yes, so but you can't ask all of this before the team acknowledged what is not said, before the team visualized and made explicit what is blocking them. And perhaps, by the way, one trick is after they said this, now have an anonymous vote. Do we want to be here, or we just go out and say that we were here and that's it? Why not? Yeah. And I think the more brave you are, the more you have chance to have the team present. Like as a facilitator, one thing that you can do, and silence is a part of it, is to be vulnerable. Is to show that you dare to say and do what people might be afraid to say and do.
Is this vulnerable or brave?
I don't know.
Or naive?
Yeah, but let's say a mix. I would say vulnerable because even, to make a joke that might not resonate into laughter is vulnerability, right? So it's not only vulnerability against the big monster of the organization that depresses us, but it's to show that you can take risks as a facilitator, as when you take responsibility as a facilitator, you give some example of what sort of behavior is allowed in this ceremony.
Did you just call a workshop ceremony? I love it.
It depends. Yes, sometimes it's a ceremony, right? Because I'm thinking about Scrum. Now we go back to Scrum.
Okay. Right? Okay. And I was thinking of the ritual ceremony. Thinking back of your initial, what you shared, how you would start a workshop without an agenda, is to ask why you're here. And then if you then see that there's a lot of misalignment or a lot of I don't know why I'm here, then this was basically open the space that you just described to allow the participants to share.
Yeah. So again, in my cards, there is one card that says, ask someone who you think you know. If there is one question to answer in this meeting, what is it? Okay. So you can lead them, there is a hidden assumption there. There is a trick, right? Because it means that there is some question to answer.
And there's at least one person who knows what the question is.
And I would love to see that confusion, so there are ways to focus the group toward there. So if no one knows, then let's say, for the sake of argument, let's simulate a meeting, right? So we start and we say, what's the purpose? And everyone says, I have no clue, right? So you can have a follow-up question, right? You say, so assuming we're stuck here for an hour, what's the best thing that we can do to have some impact? So but to ask this, you have to be present. And you have to acknowledge that no answer is a very loud answer.
Yes, the loudest of all.
And this is where your role as a facilitator comes to life. Is to verbalize what happens. And the topic I didn't want to elaborate on too much before. I don't see a real difference. I prepared for this meeting. And since I knew you would ask me about facilitation, I went and I saw what's the definition of facilitation. And it says facilitation is about a group of people. And for me, facilitation it can be for one person, right?
Yes.
Right? It can be. And this leads me to where I want to go now, which is a facilitation. In fact, there is no difference between a team and a person. There is no difference between an organization and a team. As I said before, in the Taoist way of looking at it, everything is one. As a person, you can have tons of intentions. And a good facilitator, let's call him a coach or her a coach, can help you align all of these intentions, can help all of these intentions talk one with the other. Same thing with the group, same thing with the company. You can help sometimes a person by making the pain clearer to them. Same thing with a team, same thing with an organization. So your role as a facilitator is is to help this mix of intentions to come into alignment, harmony, whatever you want to call it, right? For all of these intentions to be aligned into one big one, which you can talk to. Sometimes, when you coach, I don't know if you coach individuals. So sometimes you ask them something and they say yes, but their body says no, right? Sometimes they say something and you see on the body that the whole thing is not aligned, right? And now part of what you can do is to say, I don't know why, but I don't feel convinced by what you're saying. So you act as a mirror. You can do the same with a team, right? You say, I hear that you don't know what is the meeting purpose. I see that no one here knows, right? All you saw was silence. No one said no one knows. But you verbalize something for them, and perhaps they will say you're wrong.
Yeah.
But to mirror this thing is, I think, the most important part of facilitation, is to act as a mirror to tell you what I see that your intention is.
And I think this is what the jargon would refer to as holding the space.
Yeah, right.
Where everything is allowed and where things can be verbalized.
Yes. And there is one story that I wanted to tell you about a wonderful masterclass that I had about open space facilitation, which is also about like where I understood or verbalized to myself what is the important role of a facilitator. So I was in India in an open space that was facilitated by Dan Mesick. And Dan Mesick, his thing is open space. Right, he has a open space agility, open space facilitation, open space, a lot of things. And I love this guy. Now he started facilitating, and at some point there was a lunch break. Everyone went to lunch, which should take half an hour. And when the half hour was done, people started streaming into the room. So sessions that were planned on the board didn't take place and everything. And he sits there and we chat. And I say, aren't you like a little bit concerned about this? No, it's their problem. It's not my problem. And people come to him and they say, is it okay? And says, yeah, it's okay. No problem. Don't worry about it. This is how it should be. Or at the end, like there was someone who didn't talk to the mic, right? At the end, like people share and someone stands or sits in the middle of the circle and he talks and the microphone is really far away from him and no one hears him. And I sit there, I nudge him and say, you don't? He said, no, it's okay. And I talked to him after that. He said, this is how my goal in an open space is to give space for emerging leadership. If I will tell him that the microphone should be closer, no one else will. And I want to give a space for people to do that. And two, which is like really, I love this, like this was my realization. He served there a very important function, which is, I got this.
Yeah.
And this was a wonderful story that I once heard. What are the 3 words that you can say to it's for men to win any woman's heart, right? And it's not I love you, is I got this. So like if she says I'm really hungry, you don't say what do you want to eat and how with the time you say I got this, you know. So woman, awesome. Man, whatever. And his function is to, when people don't know if it's okay or not, as he is the authority on if it's okay or not, and as he does nothing visually, then it's okay.
And it perfectly aligns with the philosophy of open space.
Yes.
Where everything that it starts whenever it starts, it takes as long as it takes, and whatever comes up is the best thing that can come up in this very moment.
It's the only thing.
It's the only thing. Yes. It's the only thing that can come up. Yeah. Wonderful.
So perhaps the role of a facilitator is to say, I've got this. Whatever happens here, the silence that happens here, it's on me. It's okay. And the fact that now we're allowed to say that nothing will come out of this meeting, it's okay to verbalize it. It's on me.
Beautiful. I've got this.
So that's a story.
Wonderful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And now I will see whether you listened to the podcast until the end. Imagine someone fell asleep after minute 2, just woke up and doesn't have time to listen to the entire show. What would you like them to walk away with?
Ula, I have no clue. I'd let them continue sleeping. I don't really know. I know there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about, which we didn't. But, Stephen Wright, who I really love, he said, you can't have everything. Where will you put it?
So maybe the one message to tell those who cannot listen to this show is stay tuned and keep your eyes up, because there will be a follow-up, because we couldn't talk about everything.
Perhaps if you invite me.
I would love to.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention, as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.